Picture yourself in church on a fast and testimony Sunday. Somebody goes up, they muster their courage, they get to the stand, and they bear their testimony. And as they close in the name of Christ and go back to their seat, you see behind them on the stand is the bishopric, and they hold up scorecards. Maybe the bishop was feeling a little generous. They gave you a 9.8. First counselor, he's always been a tough nut to crack. His was more an 8.5. And then the second counselor somewhere in between, maybe a 9.3. And you're like, wait, what? They're scoring testimonies now? Somebody else gets up. They give a powerful one. Perfect 10s across the board. You're just starting to worry, I don't know if I'm going to get up today because I'm afraid that my score is going to be a low one. Now, that would be a horrifying way to run church. How many people are actually going to feel comfortable enough to come? And yet, welcome to early New England Puritanism. The early Puritans, pure is what they're trying to be. They had left England because they felt that the Church of England was not pure enough. So we're leaving the continent. We're going to come to a new place and show you how church is supposed to work. But what the early New England Puritans believed in was what they called a gathered community of visible saints. Most of the Puritans had a Calvinistic heritage, which was predestination. God has either chosen you to be saved, you're the elect, or he's chosen you to be damned. That's just the way it is. None of us deserve salvation anyway, but in God's infinite mercy, he picked a select few, to be his chosen elect. Now, the question for a church is, we only want the elect to come. We don't want any wolves in sheep's clothing. So how are we going to be able to judge this? How do we discern? And a lot of times it was scoring testimony meeting. It was letting people explain their experience of grace. This is why I feel like I am one of the elect. Here's the evidence of God's hand in my life. And would he really treat somebody that well if they were doomed for damnation? Well, it would then be the church fathers that would decide if this person was worthy to come into the congregation or not. Now, we're talking 1600s there. Starts to change a bit in the 1700s. By now we're in the 1800s, but most early Latter-day Saints came from Puritan backgrounds, at least their ancestry. And so here's the church beginning, and it's supposed to be the one true and living church, right? So we better keep it clean. We better have high standards of admission. Must be this holy to ride kind of a thing. And yet, is that really what the Lord intended? What I love about section 46, as they're asking, again, church is almost a year old, and they're like, so Heavenly Father, we've been doing the church right? We've been doing things the way they're supposed to, make sure that we only have the worthy people coming. And the Lord's like, no, you've been doing church wrong. Then I just picture the saints like, when were you going to tell us we were doing it wrong? And he's like, well, when were you going to ask if you were doing it right? I'll kind of let you figure things out, but I'm glad that you finally asked because no, you've been doing it a bit wrong and there is some room for improvement. Here's the improvement. Section 46, verse 3. In the first two verses, I already told you that go by the book, but also follow the Spirit. And then verse 3 begins, nevertheless. So as you think you're following the Spirit, let me at least make one thing crystal clear. In case you think the Spirit is directing you otherwise, no, let me spell this one out. Nevertheless, ye are commanded never to cast anyone out from your public meetings, which are held before the world. Ye are also commanded not to cast anyone who belongeth to the church out of your sacrament meetings. Nevertheless, if any have trespassed, let him not partake of the sacrament, that is, until he makes reconciliation. Again, I say unto you, ye shall not cast any out of your sacrament meetings who are earnestly seeking the kingdom. I speak this concerning those who are not of the church. And again, I say unto you concerning your confirmation meetings, that if there be any that are not of the church, that are earnestly seeking after the kingdom, ye shall not cast them out. Now that was a mouthful, but that set of instructions, verses 3 through 6, over and over and over, that saints are told, quit kicking people out of the church. Don't cast anyone out. If it's a sacrament meeting, let them come. Oh, you mean the members? Yeah. Well, what about the non-members? Yeah, let them come too. Okay, that's sacrament meeting. What about a confirmation meeting? People are being given the gift of the Holy Ghost. They've just made a covenant. We only want covenant keepers there, right? It's like, no. What about potential covenant keepers? What about other children of God that God cares about and is trying to lead them into the covenant? If they're earnestly seeking the kingdom, even if they're not, let them come. In some ways, I refer to the beginning of section 46 as the visitor's welcome revelation. Look at the outside of any chapel, and what's it say? Carved in stone, visitor's welcome. Section 46 is what demands that openness. This is not a closed community of visible saints. This is an open kingdom for anyone seeking that kingdom. Saints and sinners, which are basically the same thing. Saints are just sinners that keep on trying. So here we are, all the walking wounded. Well, walk on into church. You're welcome here. Can we live a little more closely to what we're seeing in section 46? I sometimes wonder, that sign on the outside of the chapel, is that for the visitors so they know they're welcome? Or is that for the members to wake us up to make sure that everyone else should feel welcome? And are we doing things to make sure that's the case? Are we too closed a community? Now, notice one thing that he adds in the verses I just read. He's not trying to overswing the pendulum so far that any kind of standard of worthiness doesn't matter at all. But he specifically confines that to partaking of the sacrament. We saw this last year in the Book of Mormon in 3 Nephi 18, when the Lord is describing discipline and standards for admission and sacrament participation and so on. In some ways, the Nephite church was struggling with similar questions. How high of a standard of admission should we keep? And the Lord comes and says, there's been disputation on that part. You have some that are much more open, others that are much more closed, and they each have a leg to stand on. For this group, the open group, their key text is, the worth of souls is great in the sight of God. The other group, the more closed group, their key text is that no one should be partaking of the sacrament unworthily, or they are partaking damnation to their souls. That's serious. Well, how do I balance the worth of souls and the sanctity of the sacraments? In fact, if you think about it, yes, on the chapel wall, it says visitors welcome, but on the temple wall, it says holiness to the Lord. I wouldn't want to switch those two signs, to be honest. There needs to be a higher level to enter the Lord's house where higher covenants are being made. I'm okay with a temple recommend required to enter the temple, but I'm grateful there's no church recommend required to enter the church. Low floor, there's church. Higher ceiling, there's temple. And between the two of them, we have a contrary to prove. Okay? The way Jesus says it in 3 Nephi 18, if you have a high standard for entrance in the church, then how are you going to minister to those that are struggling? How are you going to pray for those that need those prayers? Let them come as they are and pray that they don't leave as they were. That is key in all of this. I do understand, though, where the concern comes for some people. But if we let anyone in, what about those wolves in sheep's clothing? What about, you said those that are earnestly seeking the kingdom. How do I know if they are? Ooh, there's a great question. I understand what your concern here. So let me answer it in verse 7. But, so every time you see a nevertheless or a but, there's the bumper bowling. Don't go gutter ball on this side, but don't go gutter ball on the other. I'm trying to establish the Goldilocks zone. So, but ye are commanded in all things to ask of God, who giveth liberally. Is that ringing some bells from James 1:5? Ask of God, he giveth liberally, and that which the Spirit testifies unto you, even so I would that ye should do in all holiness of heart. Holiness of heart. That sounds like the temple sign, not the chapel sign. Keep reading. Walking uprightly before me, considering the end of your salvation, doing all things with prayer and thanksgiving, that ye may not be seduced by evil spirits or doctrines of devils or the commandments of men. For some are of men and others of devils. Now, that's a fascinating verse to hold on to at the end of this little discussion of visitors welcome. I can see why some people would be concerned about that degree of openness, especially when there are doctrines of devils and commandments of men, as opposed to the truths that come solely from God. But here's the thing. We have to learn to discern. If we are so closed off, the thought of anyone who comes with a different perspective or a question that might seem unsettling, someone on some different level of their own faith or some different stage of their journey, like, nope, you can't come until you're on this level, then who gets to come? And who can make steps forward without the help of the saints that are there to lift them? I think verse 7 has so many clues here. If we had a completely wide open visitor's welcome, and that includes struggling saints, that includes ex-Latter-day Saints, if we could really have that open door policy that visitors are welcome even if you don't agree with everything we teach. Ooh, careful, careful. Yes, careful. But how can we be careful? Notice what he said. Walk after the Spirit. Okay? Ask of God. Learn to discern is what he's saying here. Keep aiming for holiness of heart yourself. Walk uprightly, and that will set the kind of example people need to have in order to follow. Consider the end of your salvation and the end of theirs as well. By listening to that perspective, do I agree? Do I disagree? What's the Spirit telling me? Is that gospel truth? Is it the exact opposite, doctrine of devil, or somewhere in the middle where it's maybe a commandment of men? That's what they've come up with their best intent. There seems to be a positive, a negative, and a neutral described here. And for us to be open to whatever comes and then discerning through the process. If we are prayerful, if we are grateful, there's the prayer and thanksgiving that he mentioned. I believe that with the Spirit's help, we'll be able to discern. And instead of saying no to a person from the very beginning, we can welcome them in, and then we can all learn together. In fact, we can grow up in God together. And that is the purpose of the church.